Hello and welcome to Stamps Old World UK, the channel where we travel back in time through tiny printed treasures. Today we're going deep into the story, history, and current-day value of a true British classic, the King George V 2 stamp. If you've ever held one of these in your hand or found it tucked away in an old family album, you've touched a piece of history, and possibly a small fortune, depending on what you have. So sit back, grab a cup of tea, and join me as we explore one of the most collected stamps of the 20th century, the meaning behind its design, and what it's worth in today's market, all right here on Stamps Old World UK. Let's begin with what makes this stamp so recognizable. The stamp we're looking at today features the side profile of King George V, who reigned from 1910 to 1936. It's an image known to nearly every serious British stamp collector. But there's something deeper than just a portrait. King George V wasn't just a monarch, he was, perhaps surprisingly, one of the world's most passionate and knowledgeable stamp collectors. His personal collection, inherited and expanded, became what we now know as the Royal Philately collection, one of the most valuable stamp collections ever assembled. This stamp, marked 2 pence, was issued during the early years of his reign, printed in a rich red-brown or chestnut shade, depending on the exact printing year. You'll also notice the words, postage revenue, in a ribbon under his bust. This means the stamp was valid for both postal use and fiscal duties like taxes or official documents. That dual-purpose use is important and adds to the historical value. If you look closely at the edges, you'll notice a fine pattern of leaves, garlands, and symbols of agriculture, wheat, oak, and even roses, representing strength, unity, and the British Empire itself. Above the king's head, the crown signifies monarchy, of course, but also the official and legal nature of the stamp's usage. Now, let's get into the exciting part, the market value. How much is this stamp worth in 2025? For a basic used version of the King George V 2 stamp, like the one many people might find in an inherited collection or old album, the value today is typically between $2 and $10, depending on condition. That includes things like how sharp the cancellation mark is, the color quality, and whether there are any creases or tears. However, if you have a mint condition version, meaning unused, with the original gum still intact and no postmark, the value increases significantly. These can go for $25 to $100 or more, especially if the stamp has perfect centering and rich color. Collectors pay attention to those little things, and minor differences can mean a lot in this hobby. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Some versions of this stamp were printed with plate flaws, printing errors, or rare watermark types. If you find one of those, you could be holding a stamp worth hundreds, sometimes even thousands of dollars. There are well-known errors from this era, such as missing color, misperforations, or wrong watermarks, and if certified by an expert, they can command very high prices at auction. In 2022, for example, a mint block of 4 2-pence stamps with a rare watermark error sold for over $1,200 at auction. That's the beauty of stamp collecting, even something small and forgotten can become incredibly valuable if it's rare or unique. So what affects a stamp's value the most? There are 5 things to remember. Condition, clean, undamaged, and with strong color and detail. Gum, whether it's mint, unused, or used, cancelled. Centering, perfect alignment of the design within the perforations. Rarity, special printings, watermarks, or known errors. Provenance, whether it comes from a known collection or has expert certification. But value isn't always about money. These stamps are windows into history. Picture this, the year is 1920. A letter sent from Manchester to a soldier stationed in India, the envelope sealed with this very stamp. It traveled by train, ship, and foot, carrying news from home. That same stamp now sits in a collector's album, a quiet witness to time, war, love, and distance. And that's what makes stamps like these so deeply meaningful. If you're thinking of selling or insuring your stamps, or simply curious about what you've got, I always recommend referring to trusted catalogs like the Stanley Gibbons catalog, the Scott catalog, or visiting online auction records on sites like eBay, Delcamp, or Sondafair. But remember, catalog prices are often higher than what an item will actually sell for. Real market value comes from what collectors are willing to pay at any given moment. Now, if you're a beginner looking to build your collection, here are a few quick tips. Always use stamp tongs, not your fingers. Even the natural oils on skin can damage paper over time. Store your stamps in acid-free albums, and keep them in a cool, dry place away from sunlight. And if you find a rare or interesting item, consider getting it expertise. That's when a philatelic authority confirms authenticity and value with a certificate. It can increase the value and trust tenfold, and if you're wondering whether collecting stamps is still popular in 2025, the answer is yes. With digital life consuming so much of our time, more and more people are rediscovering the joy of tangible hobbies. Stamp collecting is thriving, and many younger collectors are joining the community, drawn by history, design, and the thrill of the hunt. Before we wrap up, here's something to think about. This King George V 2-pence stamp may not make you rich overnight, but it's a symbol of an era when postage wasn't just a service, it was a personal connection across the globe. Next up, the 2-pence halfpenny blue stamp, also known among collectors as the 2½ DKGV definitive. It's a stamp with a royal story, and it just might be more valuable than you think. Let's start with the design. The stamp features a beautifully engraved profile of King George V, facing left and surrounded by laurel leaves and oak, traditional symbols of strength, honor, and legacy. Above his head sits the imperial crown, and above that, the familiar words postage and revenue. These words meant the stamp could be used both to send letters and to pay official fees and taxes. The denomination, 2½ is displayed in both lower corners, and right below the king's portrait, you'll find it written out as 2-pence halfpenny. But why this odd value, 2½ pence? Well, that's where the story gets even more interesting. This was not just a random amount. The 2½ rate was introduced in the late 1800s and continued into the early 20th century as the standard rate for international letters, especially those sent to countries in the British Empire. If you were mailing a letter from London to Canada, Australia, or India around 1915, chances are this very stamp would have been used. In fact, this stamp became so essential that it was produced in large quantities during the King George V reign, especially in the years between 1913 and 1934. But despite its widespread use, its value today can still surprise you. Let's break that down. A used copy of this stamp, like the one shown here, which has clear cancellation marks and typical postal wear, generally sells today for around $2 to $8, depending on condition, cancellation style, and whether it's got good centering and perforation. Now here's where things change dramatically. If you find a mint condition version, and used, with full gum on the back, its value rises quickly. Mint examples can fetch $20 to $60, and in exceptional cases with perfect centering and brilliant color, they can go for over $100 to the right buyer. But the real money is in the rare varieties. There are several known printings of the 2½ blue with shades ranging from pale ultramarine to deep blue, along with plate varieties, watermark errors, and even a few notable misprints. Some of these rare versions have sold at auction for $300, $500, and in rare cases even more than $1,000, especially in blocks or with historical postal usage. One recorded example from the 1920s with a rare color error and watermark variation sold for over $1,500 in a European auction just a few years ago. So if you're holding one of these stamps, especially in mint condition or with anything that looks unusual, it might be worth getting it looked at by a professional philatelic society or valuation expert. Look for clues like the exact shade of blue, any minor misprints, or inconsistencies in the paper or watermark. Now, like with any collectible, condition is everything. Collectors look for well-centered designs, clean perforations, fresh color, and intact gum on the back if it's unused. A small crease or tear can bring the value down by 50% or more. On the flip side, a flawless stamp can be worth far more than catalog value. Let's not forget, this isn't just about money. The King George V 2½ stamp represents a time when letters were the only way to connect across continents. In a world without email or video calls, this small blue stamp carried birthday wishes, wartime news, business orders, and love letters across oceans. Each stamp is a frozen moment in time, a tiny historical witness. If you're starting a collection, this is a great stamp to include. It's affordable for beginners in its common form, yet still rich in historical significance. You can study color differences, check for watermark types like the multiple cipher or block cipher, and compare printing years, all while building your eye for detail. And if you already have one in your collection, now's a great time to revisit it, examine it carefully, and maybe even research its printing year and variety. You could be sitting on something rarer than you thought. Now, before we end, here are a few helpful collector's tips. Always store your stamps in acid-free stockbooks or albums, away from moisture and sunlight. Use stamp tongs, not fingers, they help avoid oils and accidental creases. If you think your stamp is rare or unusual, get it expertised. A certificate from the Royal Philatelic Society or similar body can significantly raise value. Keep an eye on online platforms like eBay, Delcamp, and reputable auction houses. They can help you track real-world sale prices, which often differ from catalog values. Stamp collecting is not just a hobby, it's a way to hold the past in your hand. It connects us to the stories, messages, and moments that traveled the world long before we did. And stamps like the King George V 2½ Blue are a perfect reminder of that. Next up, the elegant and subtle 2p lilac stamp, issued during the long reign of Queen Victoria. This stamp is more than just a dusty piece of paper. It's a connection to the 19th century, and as we'll discover, it may be more valuable than you think in today's dollars. Let's take a closer look. This stamp, issued around 1883 to 1901, is part of a series known as the Lilac and Green issues, also called the Unified Series. At a glance, you'll notice the minimalist design, Queen Victoria's bust in profile facing left, surrounded by the inscriptions, postage and revenue, at the top and 2p at the bottom. The color, a soft lilac or mauve tone, was specifically chosen to deter fraudulent reuse. Why? Because by the 1880s, people had discovered how to wash off cancellation marks from stamps printed in brighter colors like red or green. In response, the British government issued these lilac stamps using fugitive inks that would run or fade if tampered with. Clever, isn't it? Security design in the 19th century. Now, unlike earlier issues that were printed using line engraving, this one was created using surface printing, making it faster and cheaper to produce, and you'll often find multiple used examples from the late Victorian period. So what about market value in 2025? Let's talk numbers. A used Queen Victoria 2p lilac stamp, like the one we're looking at here, with a clear postmark, generally sells today for $1 to $5, depending on how clean it is. Stamps with light cancellations, no creases, and good centering will be at the top of that range. However, if you have a mint condition version, and used, with full original gum and no hinge marks, that's a different story. These can fetch $30 to $100, and in exceptional condition, possibly over $150. Now here's where it gets interesting. Some of these stamps were printed with control letters in the corners, and some have plate varieties or die flaws that can dramatically increase their value. There are known error types, including misalignments and color shifts, that have been auctioned for several $100s, particularly if they're verified by a philatelic expert. Even a block of 4 mint stamps with perfect margins can be worth $500 or more, especially when accompanied by a certificate of authenticity from bodies like the Royal Philatelic Society London. But beyond the dollars, it's the historical context that makes this stamp special. When this 2D lilac was first issued, the British Empire was nearing its peak. Queen Victoria was not just monarch of the United Kingdom but Empress of India, with influence stretching across every continent. This little stamp, stuck on envelopes and parcels, carried letters across oceans to soldiers in South Africa, merchants in India, missionaries in Africa, and settlers in Australia. Each one is a silent witness to Victorian ambition, bureaucracy, and communication. These were the last stamps printed with Victoria's portrait before her death in 1901, making them not just postal tools, but the final philatelic breath of a long, transformative reign. Let's take a quick moment to talk about how to examine yours if you've found one. Look for watermarks. Most of these stamps are watermarked with the small, crown watermark or the Jubilee lines. Use a watermark detector or simply backlight it carefully. Check the perforations. Stamps with even, undamaged perforations are more desirable. Look for unusual corner letters. These vary by plate and can help identify rare issues. Always examine for creases, fins, or tears. Damage can lower the value dramatically. If in doubt, consult an expert. Even small details can mean the difference between a common item and a rare find. And if you're a beginner collector, this is a perfect stamp to study. It's rich in history, widely available in both mint and used formats, and full of small variations that sharpen your philatelic eye. Before we wrap up, here are a few final tips to protect and enjoy your collection. Use stamp tongs, not your fingers, to avoid damage. Keep your stamps in archival quality stockbooks, away from light, heat, and humidity. Label everything, especially older stamps, noting issue year, watermark, condition, and catalog number. Consider getting high-value items expertised. A certificate can add hundreds of dollars in value. And of course, join a community, online forums, local stamp clubs, or philatelic societies. Stamps are meant to be shared, discussed, and admired. So there you have it, the story and modern value of the Queen Victoria 2p lilac stamp. It's not just an item from the past, it's a conversation with it. Next up, the elegant King Edward VII 1p red. But now, we're adding a special twist to our journey, the often overlooked but deeply important postage due 2p stamp, a darkly elegant stamp that once signaled unpaid postage and carried a world of meaning on its own. These three stamps together form a compelling story of how Britain handled its postal affairs, celebrated its empire, and presented its monarchy. Let's begin by revisiting the 1924 British Empire Exhibition 1p stamp, a bold and patriotic piece of philatelic art. Created to celebrate the Grand British Empire Exhibition held at Wembley, this stamp featured a proud lion beside the portrait of King George V, set against a deeply colored red background. It's a stamp that symbolized pride, ambition, and unity across the empire, a propaganda piece in miniature form. Though millions were printed, mint-condition versions are still collectible today, often selling for $10 to $30, while rarer varieties or those from the 1925 reprint can fetch even more. Then we journeyed to the Edwardian era, with the 1p red stamp featuring King Edward VII, a more reserved but equally symbolic design. This stamp marked a shift in the monarchy following the long reign of Queen Victoria. King Edward VII brought a new energy to the British throne, and this stamp, with his profile surrounded by laurel and crown, signified stability and change all at once. Today, used examples sell for about $1 to $3, but mint-condition pieces with strong color and good centering can bring in $10 to $40, or even more if they carry rare postmarks or production flaws. But now let's explore a very different type of stamp, one that didn't celebrate a monarch or an exhibition, but instead served a functional and often unwelcome purpose. This is the postage due 2p stamp, a dark purple and white design with bold text and classic British typography. It reads "Postage Due" across the top in strong lettering, and in the center, you see the large 2D, meaning 2p, framed in a box, with 2p written along the bottom. These stamps were not sold to the public in the usual way. Instead, they were used by the post office when mail was sent with insufficient postage. Imagine this, back in the early 1900s, if someone dropped a letter into a postbox with the wrong amount of postage, maybe they forgot to add the extra penny or two, that letter would still be delivered, but the recipient would have to pay the missing amount. And this is where the postage due stamps came in. They were attached to the envelope to indicate how much money was owed before the item could be released to the receiver. These stamps are part of what makes the British postal system so fascinating. They were utilitarian, but that doesn't mean they weren't beautiful. The intricate design of the postage due 2D stamp is a perfect example of the fine craftsmanship applied even to administrative stamps. It combines a practical message with strong graphic appeal, featuring ornamental flourishes, bold fonts, and clear denomination markings. The dark coloration made it stand out immediately on envelopes, signaling a kind of penalty, but it also makes it highly distinctive for collectors today. Despite their humble purpose, these stamps are highly sought after. They weren't printed in the same volumes as regular postage stamps, and many were torn or discarded when the mail was opened. That makes finding a clean, intact postage due 2p stamp something special. Used examples usually sell for around $2 to $5, but those in mint condition, especially in used ones with gum intact, can fetch between $10 and $40, depending on the issue year, watermark, and printing variation. There are several series of these stamps issued over time. And specialist collectors look for specific details like plate numbers, watermark types, and even errors such as inverted numerals or color misprints. Some rarities in the postage due series have sold for over $100 to $200, especially when certified and well preserved. What's more, the world of postage due stamps opens a new window into postal history. It's one thing to collect stamps with kings and lions, but collecting these penalty stamps gives insight into how everyday people interacted with the postal system, how mistakes were handled, how regulations were enforced, and how the postal office kept everything running smoothly. These stamps tell stories not of grand exhibitions or monarchs, but of daily life, missed pennies, and the practical side of communication. When you put all three of these stamps together, the 1924 British Empire Exhibition stamp, the Edward VII 1p red, and the postage due 2p, you get a fuller picture of British postal history. You see the celebration of empire, the transition of kings, and the discipline of a structured postal system. Each stamp adds a new dimension to the story of how the UK communicated with itself and with the world during a time of great change. As a collector or enthusiast today, you have the unique opportunity to preserve and study these tiny artifacts. Whether you find them at flea markets, auctions, inherited collections, or specialized dealers, remember, it's not just about monetary value, it's about the stories, the art, and the era they represent. In today's digital world, stamps may seem outdated, but to those who understand them, they remain powerful links to the past. So whether you're a beginner or a lifelong philatelist, these stamps deserve a place in your collection. Keep an eye out for clean perforations, strong color, and unusual features. And remember, stamps like these are becoming harder to find in good condition. Their value, both historical and monetary, continues to grow with each passing year. Thank you for watching this in-depth look at British stamps here on Stamps Old World UK. If you found this video informative, entertaining, or even inspiring, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a deep dive into stamp history. And drop a comment below, do you own a postage due stamp? Or maybe you've inherited an Edward VII or Empire Exhibition stamp from a relative. Share your stories, I love reading them, and fellow viewers do too. Until next time, keep collecting, keep preserving, and remember, every stamp is a story waiting to be told. This is Stamps Old World UK, signing off.